George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Everything I was going to say just changed in the last 2 minutes. Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. Whether he knows it or not, someone has put his signature to a resignation letter in which he pointedly does not endorse his Vice President KamalaHarris as his successor. That's because Nightmare on Elm Street is about to reprise. It's going to be Hillary Clinton, the closest thing to civil war that the United States could possibly experience is a rerun of the 2016 battle between Donald J. Trump and Hillary R. Clinton. Don't know if Joe knows how many wars he's in now, but he just started another one this week. And the British, as always, are at the tail end of the rabid American war dog. It turns out that Britain, Italy, and the United States of America helped the mass murderer Netanyahu launch devastating war against the poorest country on the earth, known as Yemen. Oh, and a state of war exists between me and Adidas, and I hope to enlist you in the struggle. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Boycotting's kind of been easy for me these last years, decades even. Almost all of the things on the boycott list are things I would never drink, eat, or put on my face. Unguents, creams, perfumes are not for me. I'm a man of my age and class. I'd never eat a Happy Meal. I can't think of anything that would make me less happy than eating a Happy Meal. I don't drink and never have drunk fizzy drinks that are the equivalent of a cup full of sugar. So it's all been easy for me, but now it's got difficult. I am one of Britain's biggest customers of Adidas. And this week, you'll see me putting it on the bonfire. I'm not calling on you to do that, because if you've already bought it, well, that'll just have to be placed to one side. But I am, tonight, launching a nationwide boycott of Adidas, and I hope to persuade you to join me. And as a father of 5 young children, most of them super sporty, I can assure you that I spend many hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a year on Adidas gear. No more. Because a state of war now exists between me and them. It was always the case that this company was one that we should have supped with a very long spoon. Founded by a prominent member of the German Nazi Party. Indeed, 2 founding members of Adidas. Brothers. One of the brothers went off to form Puma, but let's leave Puma alone, at least for the minute. Adolf, what else would he be called? Adolf Dassler joined the Nazi Party in 1933, and his company was made great, as was others, Mercedes-Benz amongst them, by their close relationship with another Adolf Hitler, the Nazi mass murderer, genocider, who went on to massacre tens of millions of people in the Holocaust of the Second World War. They were big on sport, you see, the Nazis, and Dassler was just the man to rig them out. But that, notwithstanding that history, I did continue to purchase their goods. They were somehow attractive to me, and I was somehow the father of children who found them attractive and useful in their sporting endeavors, but no more. The decision that Adidas made to sack BellaHadid, the fragrant rose of Palestine, when they had already commissioned her, and I'm sure already paid her, to be a face of a retro line of 1970s Adidas products, because she was a Palestinian, one who would not renounce her nationality, one who proudly flew the flag for Palestine. Adidas did this. They sacked her under the pressure of the Zionist lobby, and somehow I immediately felt that this was the line behind which we would no longer be prepared to retreat. BellaHadid is the hill I'm going to die on. BellaHadid is the last straw. BellaHadid must be defended. Adidas must be brought low. They must be taught a lesson that there are many more of us than there are of the supporters of the genocidal, increasingly openly fascist regime of Benjamin Netanyahu and the now official apartheid state, designated by the world's highest court as an apartheid state, an illegal occupier, which must vacate all of the territories that it holds in breach of international law, which includes not just Gaza, but not just the West Bank, but East Jerusalem also. All specifically named. Get out, illegal settler regime. Get out, apartheid regime. This is it. This is the battle line drawn. We're standing here, and we intend to win, just like the people of Yemen, the bravest people on the earth. The most heroic country on the earth are the people of Yemen, thousands of miles away from Palestine, who are ready to die to the last man, to be the only country in the world that is ready to give its own blood to defend the people, women, children, men in Gaza, still being slaughtered at an industrial rate in an obviously genocidal frenzy of murder, mutilation, and national humiliation and degradation. The Yemenis are a poor but proud people, the poorest people on the planet, the proudest people on the planet. So I stand with Yemen, do you? I stand with BellaHadid, do you? I'm launching tonight from this pulpit here a nationwide, and you should make it a campaign in your own nation. I can't be responsible for people in France going along to watch Israeli athletes, their hands dripping with blood as they throw the javelin in Macron's discredited Olympic Games. I can't be responsible for the public in the United States, but I am responsible for taking on the burden of persuading the British people to make a boycott like no other boycott of Adidas products, so that they feel the pain, some of the financial pain at least, that the Palestinian people have suffered. Adidas, the day that you decided to brazenly begin to embark on a policy of propagandizing for Netanyahu and his murder gang, is a day that I intend to make you regret for the rest of your miserable corporate lives. Down with Adidas. Starting now, my boycott has begun. So should yours and my bonfire of my previously purchased Adidas clothes will be televised live over the next couple of days. That is if the rain in this global boiling July summer ever stops falling, at least where I am. But it never rains, but it pours, doesn't it, Joe? I told you more than a year ago, here on this show, and over again, that they could not possibly run Joe Biden because his cognitive decline was so severe, so sharp, so precipitous, that they would be heading into the valley of electoral death at the hands of their nemesis, Donald Trump, if they persisted in putting this man up. I believe this show was one of the first outlets in the world that began to raise the specter of President Kamala Harris. Cackling Kamala Harris. Laughing gas Harris, who's thanked for her service in Joe Biden's resignation letter, but pointedly is not endorsed as his successor. It would be the obvious thing to have done. And obviously, when he didn't do it, it's because he intends to support someone else. And that someone else is Hillary Clinton. With all of our crimes, all of our blunders, dripping with all of our condescension, it's my turn, the most qualified in history to be president. All of her lack of common touch, her baskets of deplorables. That dress that she wore at the Tonys, on your screen now, somewhere in Ohio, there's a Holiday Inn missing its shower curtain. I knew that night when I saw it. I saw her appearance at the Tonys. I brought it to your attention on the show that weekend. Remember? I told you, why would the Tonys be bringing out Hillary Clinton in the wardrobe she looted from Muammar Gaddafi? It's because she is the candidate, not Big Mike, still less cackling Kamala. It's Hillary Clinton. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Because this means that for the American deep state, this is Armageddon. This is no ordinary election. This is the ultimate battle. I don't know which of them could best be described as the Antichrist, but this is the prism through which it's going to be seen, and it is a zero-sum game. There can be no coming together in America with Hillary Clinton flying the flag for the donkey party and Donald Trump flying the flag for the elephants. So strap yourselves in. This is going to be the mother of all presidential election campaigns, and the loser doesn't just lose all, but America might be on the point of war. If this election is rigged, as I believe the election of 2020 was rigged, if it is rigged, then the forces behind a twice cheated Donald Trump, a man who cheated death in the most obvious deep state conspiracy to murder I've ever seen, even in fiction. 1, 2, 3, 4 shooters, one on the water tower, one on the roof, a sloping roof. Can't put guards up there, they might fall off. We'll put them inside the building with the sloping roof instead. We'll put a Secret Service detail on Donald Trump that you wouldn't ask to guard the dodgems in the fairground of a traveling show. Midget women who don't even know how to holster their weapon, were tasked with protecting the front runner in an American presidential race. They hoped to solve the problem of Donald Trump by lawfare, by putting up adult entertainers to entertain us with tales of his small hands. They hoped that they could put him behind bars on mortgage fraud. They hoped that all of this humiliation would reduce his standing amongst the electorate, and yet they found that with every mugshot, every kangaroo court, his power grew greater, not lesser. They tried to kill him, and they failed in every endeavor, leaving only the deployment of the thermonuclear weapon that is Hillary Clinton. Stand by, folks. It's going to be the mother of all presidential campaigns, and we here at MOATS will be with you and with it every step of the way. I want to turn, if I may, to the International Court of Justice. Lipstick on a pig, yes, but very, very significant lipstick. The judgment that it reached by overwhelming majorities, in one case 14 judges to 1, no guessing who the one is. Uganda's inexplicably Zionist justice from Uganda on count after count after count. The International Court of Justice has thrown out every Israeli, American, British, Western representation about their lack of locus in the matter, about the inability of the court to make adjudications on this or that, drawing on the Security Council resolutions now so extant that they've reached decrepitude. The resolutions of 1967, 242, 338, all the resolutions of the Security Council on the matter were codified now in a legal judgment. And a stentorian demand was made by the court for Israel immediately to vacate all of the illegally held occupied territories which have not become Israeli territories by virtue of an illegal annexation. Whatever Donald Trump thinks, whatever Joe Biden thinks, you see, a thief can never become an owner just by holding on to stolen property for long enough. It does not become your property. The Golan Heights, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza are all one piece of territory, said the court, and Israel illegally occupies all of it and must cease and desist, must cease and desist and evacuate the 850,000 illegal land thieves who have settled on illegally occupied, stolen land. All that infrastructure that has been built, apartheid roads, apartheid walls, settlements that look like Beverly Hills on top of the rolling hills of the Holy Land, must all be vacated, cannot continue to be illegally occupied. And ipso facto, the policy of apartheid, the apartheid policy being the only possible way you could justify holding this territory in perpetuity, because that's what 75 years, that's what 55 years is. It's perpetuity. It's not a temporary occupation. holding that territory decade after decade with no intention to return it, but refusing to give the vote to the people whose land you're occupying, can only be described as apartheid, can only be described as apartheid, in which the occupier has all the rights and the occupied people have none. The court has called it exactly as it is, exactly as we, in this great moral campaign, in my case for half a century, the court has vindicated us in every particular. It has dotted every I and crossed every T. The indictment is plain, but here's the rub. The court's judgment doesn't just condemn Israel as a criminal state. It designates as a crime any country assisting that criminal enterprise. So every airplane you give, every gun, rocket, shell, every tank you give, every dollar, pound, euro you give, every piece of diplomatic and propaganda support that you give to that illegal enterprise is itself ipso facto illegal. That's why there is a deadly silence from the British Prime Minister, a King's Counsel, a human rights lawyer, who now knows for him and for David Lammy, his plenipotentiary out there in the apartheid state, he's now acting illegally as a piece of politics. The ICJ deserves an Oscar. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. It is the mother of all talk shows.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So the poll question tonight: will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. Please, if you're on the YouTube stream, subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get to 500,000 subscriptions. It will help me algorithmically. 21,805 of you have already voted, for which I'm grateful. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada. In the US and Canada, it's +1 844 944 3344. It's also free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522. And in the rest of the world, it's 44203 966 2625. Lamis Deek is a good friend of mine, a Palestinian-American attorney out of New York, but that's only the half of it. She's a Palestinian-American and one of the most hardworking and eloquent champions of Palestine in the whole of the United States. And it's been some time since I saw her, so I'm very grateful, Lamis, for your attendance this evening on the mother of all talk shows. Now, the ICJ first, if we can. Then I want to talk about the situation between the apartheid state and the people of Yemen, the people of Lebanon. Are we on the brink of, especially as the US now has a void in the White House, are we on the brink of something big? But let's start with the ICJ, not least because you are yourself a lawyer. How significant was the verdict, long awaited, of the ICJ in your view?
I think that this is a pivotal moment in Palestinian history. That's how I would mark it. Not because the ICJ said anything that we didn't know. I mean, as you said, yes, ICJ, lipstick on the pig on one hand, but I think what it did is it wiped the lipstick off the pigs and has been forcing them to confront themselves, has been forcing international law, the UN international system, and states to confront themselves and either admit that they have relegated and lay waste to law for justice and peace, or accept and begin a new era. And I think the onus is on them. It is just a declaratory judgment. I know a lot of people, and I'd like to address this if that's okay. And by the way, thank you for that moving and kind introduction, George. Many things are not pleasurable these days as a Palestinian. Seeing you, one of our heroes, the progress that you've made for all social justice causes is truly a pleasure and delight to be with you, and I thank you. This is a declaratory judgment, right? They articulated everything that Palestinians and their allies and you have been saying for the past 58 years and 76 years. So it's declaratory. It's an affirmation and a reaffirmation of law. But this is, in fact, it is, a conviction in the highest court of the world, in the only and highest legal organ of the United Nations, which means that this bears a lot of weight. And there are numerous critical features of this opinion that I think haven't been discussed. You well know, George, that one of Israel's strongest games and strategies has been to create facts on the ground and then force the international system to reply and revolve around these facts on the ground. And what the ICJ has said, all of that is meaningless. It doesn't matter how big your settlements are, how many settlers you have, how big your prisons and dungeons and military bases are, they all have to leave. It has laid waste to the Israeli strategy of facts on the ground making law, which also means that all of the instruments and legal names for all of the criminal acts that they have taken, unprecedented in nature and duration, are not legitimate. This is huge. This speaks to the prison system. This speaks to the convictions. This speaks to the support that these illegalities have been given by the Western world, i.e. consider the terrorism designation, because the ICJ has also said that Palestinian resistance to these illegalities, i.e. war crimes and crimes against humanity, is itself legitimate, number one, and that self-defense by Israel is not legitimate, and that their claim of self-defense, the entire justification of self-defense for all of their apparatuses, physical, legal, military, settlement, and otherwise, are lies. And this is the other really critical feature of the ICJ decision. If people read it clearly, it's a short decision. They've said all of these things are lies. And you raised UN Resolution 242, and I think it's important to have a bit of a broad and detailed approach to the reading of this decision. But given that 242 repeatedly reinforces the Israeli narrative of the need for security and land swaps, this also brings into question the legitimacy and the nature of Resolution 242, even if it's been referred to. So I think those are two of some of the most critical features. I've got more to say, but I do want to let you interrupt me and guide it to basically discuss what do we do now and why is this pivotal? This is pivotal because there's been trillions of dollars spent on this, right? This has also laid waste to the myth of Israeli democracy, of Western morality in their support of the Israeli apartheid for genocide and colonize for genocide project. This has laid waste to Western credibility, and I don't mean just the governments, but society and media at large, who have regurgitated and enforced and imposed Israeli mythology for the purpose of colonization and genocide. And this is very important for the rest of the world to see and understand that these are all lies. All of the systems that have been built around this, the trillions of dollars, the normalization projects, including many of our current and former administrations here in the US, have all been laid to waste by this ICJ decision, alongside the negotiation posture between, mind you, the Palestinian Authority and not the PLO, which is the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority has not been elected by the Palestinian people, right? The negotiation terms have now completely repivoted and should be returning, and I'm not saying that Oslo is legitimate, to the core issues of Palestinian return, reparations, self-determination. So you can cut me off or I can keep going and talk about another critical feature, which is the court's finding and reaffirmation of self-determination being inalienable to Palestinians. It didn't say inalienable only to Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. It said inalienable to Palestinians. This opens the door for many things and work to come. And I think you nailed it in, everything that you've said before. Nothing is self-executing. This opinion is not self-executing. The laws, justice, morality is not self-executing. And that's on us. I'll concede to you, and I can talk more about both the critical features, the potential for how we can use this, what this means for the rest of Palestine and Palestinians, the majority of whom do not live in the West Bank and Gaza, and perhaps what we could do moving forward. George.
Well, I think you have peerlessly demolished the dissenting voices, if there are any. They seem to be treating the ICJ as if it never happened, rather than contest its legally incontestable findings. But you have demolished any possible lines of defense of the Israeli position, which, if I may summarize, all the territory, including East Jerusalem, is illegally occupied territory. Illegally occupied territory cannot be held on to for 55 plus years, 75 plus years. Then it becomes an attempt at permanent occupation. If you have permanent occupation, it's first of all illegal, but must involve a secondary crime, namely of an apartheid system to stop the people of that illegally occupied territory having a say in how they are governed and what their purpose is. The third thing you touched on, which is very important to me, because I did not get involved in this subject 50 years ago for the people of the West Bank and Gaza. I'd never been in the West Bank or Gaza then. I got involved in this because of the millions of Palestinians living in refugee camps in other countries altogether, and their right to return to their homes. They are now included in this subject in the way that they were excluded by Oslo, which failed to address their right to return. But now the court has vindicated they're inalienable, i.e. cannot be changed by anybody, by any negotiation, by any treaty. A negotiation cannot overrule someone's inalienable rights. So the Palestinian right to return is another great victor of this court decision. So it's plain that they intend to ignore the court's decision. Although I noted that Mr. Lavrov said this week that Russia can no longer be an observer to these events that are taking place, not just in Palestine, but vis-a-vis the neighboring countries also. I saw Mr. Lavrov's not a man that speaks idly or loosely. He meant something by that. And I'm thinking that some Russian, Chinese, India, whatever BRICS move is coming. But if they ignore the verdict of the ICJ, that leaves us feeling good because we're vindicated, but it doesn't bring much relief to your people, the Palestinian people, does it?
Not immediately. And I think you touched on this a few times today, but in many prior instances and shows, George, which is this is cumulative. And this is a matter of leveraging and bargaining power. I do want to highlight a couple of more critical features so that we can understand, and I'd like you and others to understand how this can all be leveraged. I alluded to the deconstruction of Israeli lies and the failure of justifications for those lies. This implicates how Palestinians are treated throughout the world, even within Palestine in the 1948 territories and in the refugee camps. But moving on, aside from finding that Palestinians have the right to go back to their homes, what the ICJ also clearly stated was that Palestinians have the right to reparations, and then clarified that reparations included reparations, restitution, and satisfaction, taken in the context that the Palestinian people are defined as a whole and their rights are now treated as a whole from the highest UN organ and international court. This becomes very critical into how does this get leveraged for bargaining power. I think that is critical. The other element is the finding that Gaza and the West Bank are one, and this cannot be reconciled without looking at and reaffirming both these two last features, Resolution 194, and perhaps even reconsidering Resolution 181. Now, the ICJ also kicked it back over to the UN General Assembly, and they said, go and find and figure out the modalities. Well, that means that governments with proper learned counsel, right, diplomatic advocates, legal advocates would be willing and have a broad swath of mechanisms, legal mechanisms, to begin implementing these rights, even if it's incremental, right? While at the same time, those who are naturally prone or will be more inclined, given the turn of global events, to take a more firm stand are also now more well equipped legally with the voice of justice, with this ruling, and with a clear, deconstructed, briefed, legally and diplomatically briefed agenda of how to implement Palestinian rights and ensure Palestinian liberation. I think this also speaks to the main topic at our hand, which it should be, which is the role of Yemen. Yemen has, since inception, been the only country that has been implementing Article 1 of the Genocide Convention. Well, now they can say that they're also implementing the ICJ opinion today, which is a full boycott, divestment, and sanctions, not just for weapons and jet fuel and settlement construction equipment, prison and dungeon equipment, human resources, the terrorists who are flying in from all over the world to come and colonize. They just burned my town for the umpteenth time yesterday again, George, yeah? Coming from all over the world to do this. The Pakistani government saying that Netanyahu is now designated a terrorist. The Yemeni government designating Israeli officials and U.S. officials as terrorists, as they began to implement the legal, and we've briefed this issue out, the legal blockade of material support to genocide in Palestine by the Israelis. All of this becomes cumulative. And what this does, and I think it's important people take this away, law and discourse and society have a symbiotic relationship. one develops and creates and recreates each other. And so discourse will help further the law, and now the law will further the discourse and the grassroots movement. There's a markedly different bargaining and leverage power from the highest level of state government to the lowest grassroots level. It's a different dynamic when you walk in with your counsel, right? And you have a briefed issue when you're fired, when you're moving to divest, when you've got a ceasefire resolution, than it is to just say these things. And now we are armed in a way that is different. We understand absent direct military intervention, there isn't hope. But I do want to just briefly on that, I'm sorry, George, I know I'm going on. It's kicked over to the UN General Assembly. That doesn't stop the UN General Assembly from moving to take actions even over the objection of the UN Security Council at this point. So there's also hope for more meaningful international and state intervention, I think, at this point as well.
On the subject of Yemen, I saw something beautiful you wrote the other day, that Arabic is the most poetic of languages, but no poetry could fully do justice to the heroism is also too small a word. There's something sublime, divine about the millions in Yemen, thousands of miles away, who could easily turn their faces away and would have more justification for doing so than most, being themselves regularly the subject of war and invasion and mass poverty and the rest. And yet this people, this Yemeni people, are the people who, more than any other in the whole world, have been ready to stand up and perchance to die to defend Gaza. This is, it's writing their name in the stars, is it not?
Indeed, and their names have been written in the stars previously, and I think you nailed it. You know, this gives me chills to think about. I went to Yemen, I believe it was 2010, I don't recall. Within the first hour, George, it was unmistakably clear that this was a people that could not be defeated. And what was it that I saw within that first hour that made that crystal clear? Was that this is a people that had a depth of love and a prioritization of community and the other for each other, and had the capacity, because they're driven by that passion of love for humanity, had the capacity and the commitment to enforce that love. And that is what we are watching. Yes, law gives us the tools and the analysis and the language. But to me, from what I saw and what I have seen and what we have heard, not just previously, but throughout the history of Yemen, especially most recently, this is love with enforcement in its indeed most divine form. I do believe that Yemen's history has proven itself, not just in the recent future, but in the past, countless attempts to subjugate the Yemenis to a Western globalized concept of how their societies and economies should run have failed. A lot of money and equipment put into it since 9/11, soldiers and otherwise. All of that has failed. We are hopeful about their capacity, though we worry for them and love them reciprocally, and their people, and wish them no harm. Yemen sits in a sea of Arab states who are not just inactive, but who are actively supporting Israel. We have long said as Palestinians, we don't need your support, but we'd like you to start supporting our murderers and our oppressors. And Yemen is not only not assisting, but is sacrificing itself, its economy, its people, and its safety. These past 3 weeks, I have to say this, George, these past 3 weeks have been especially difficult for Palestinians, not just in Gaza and the West Bank, but I think there has been an exhaustion, a pain, and a collapse that we have not seen since the beginning of the genocide. It had given me cause for concern myself, and Yemen has just restored our breath.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much, Lamis Deek, attorney at law and inexhaustible political activist for Palestine. Thanks for joining us. Will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? Yes or no? Nearly 25,000 of you have voted. Let's see where that poll stands approximately 1 hour from now. Let me take a quick break and I'll be right back. Stay tuned. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of MOATS on our MOATS podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search MOATS with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view is even more difficult. But it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, Tom Sullivan says only Michelle Obama has the balls to take on Trump. The postscript to my opening remarks is that Biden has now endorsed Kamala Harris, but that Big Mike Obama and Hillary Clinton are both firmly in the race. And so it's a very complicated situation. But the one thing you cannot avoid saying, if Joe Biden isn't fit to be the Democratic candidate 5 months from now, how can he be fit to be the President of the United States right now, with his finger on the nuclear trigger, with his role as the leader of all these Western countries, so-called democracies? What are we going to do now, chaps? Now that Joe is out of action, and now that he's incapable of fighting an election, is he capable of fighting World War III? These are the kind of questions that automatically arise. Will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? Well, again, Twitter being the only exception, because that's the only platform that the imperialist rump, that is the tail end of the pantomime horse of NATO, appear to have the ability to influence. That's the only place that their bots ever show up on our polls. But with that exception, it is overwhelmingly the view that the US and the UK will not enforce the ICJ judgment. Now, the podcast. This podcast is now in the top 10 in Saudi Arabia. Is it even legal in Saudi Arabia to watch, or listen rather, to the MOATS podcast? I'm very glad. I take my hat off to the people of Saudi Arabia. And we are even charting in a country which we never name. In the apartheid state itself, the mother of all talk shows is in the top 10. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Let's take the first call of the evening from England, Swindon. David wants to talk about the ICJ. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I had that on my list before you even come. Your last guest absolutely crystallized what's happening. You need to get her on at least once a month. Fantastic. Okay,
Yeah, she's been a friend of mine for a very long time. And,
you should get back.
Extremely eloquent. Someone's just said, DW just said, Lamis Deek is what Amal Clooney could be if she only had a heart. How beautifully put. But Lamis is much more beautiful than Amal Clooney.
Well, anyway, the main point is,
go ahead.
When I saw the news of the ICC judgment, I think it was on Tuesday, was on Al Jazeera. I thought, I'll flip over to BBC and ITV and all the. It was not even mentioned. It wasn't 1, 2, 3, or 4 on the list. Not even mentioned. The court judgment.
No.
Compare and contrast that. I mean, when Putin got an arrest warrant for moving children across a border.
Yeah.
It's just
that's still in the news now.
Yeah.
Never mind when it was issued.
Yeah, I know, it's mad. So Putin.
But there comes a point, David. There has to come a point, doesn't there, where such grotesque censorship by omission becomes apparent to more and more and more people, and that becomes a critical mass, and we know what comes after a critical mass.
Nothing on the newspaper, nothing on the newspapers, nothing, absolute news blackout. Like I said, if it was Russia that'd done that, there'd be Olympic bans, football bans, whatever. So nothing.
Well, there is Olympic bans, football bans. The Israelis have killed dozens of leading Palestinian footballers, FIFA referees and assistant referees, murdered them. And they're still not banned from FIFA. Infantino, well named, deliberately kicked it down the road, kicked the can down to get them past the Olympic Games so they could still participate in the football tournament. It's unbelievable, David.
Point, don't worry, I'm really wound up today. My last point is, why do we persist in calling them settlers? They're not settlers, it's a euphemism. It's not the Waltons, they're not, happy on the prairie settling. They're land grabbing squatters that evict people and run them over with tanks.
Yeah.
I'm really wound up tonight. Sorry, George. Just,
well, you and me both, David. How can you not be? What kind of people would we be if we weren't wound up about that?
I know. It's just, settlers. Oh, those little settlers are coming in, knocking schools down. No, I've got to go and have a lay down now. But fantastic show. Been following you.
Okay, but don't switch off.
I don't know. I won't switch off. Do not worry. It's like my clock is tuned in on a Wednesday and Sunday. Okay, mate.
God bless you. Thanks very much for that. Faris Al-Thibani says, Lamis Deek is a champ and my heroine, mine too. MK, what a diatribe from Lamis Deek. We need to hear more from this excellent guest. And Ayub Esaidi says, Biden dropped out of the election. Trump is in trouble. What? The Democratic president has dropped out due to a sudden collapse in cognitive decline, but it's Trump that's in trouble. If KamalaHarris is his opponent, you won't even have to wipe the floor with her. She will no longer be visible. So atomized will she be if she is the candidate. Happy Little Fox, a.k.a. Benji, says joke Biden. But on the line from North Dakota is Ahmad on the Biden withdrawal. Ahmad, welcome. What would you like to say?
Well, Mr. Galloway, thank you very much for taking my call. And like your previous caller, David, I'm also wound up. It's been very, very negative past year, political-wise. And just turning onto your show and listening to callers and your analyses gives me hope, and that there's lots of good people. So thank you very much that you do, sir. You're quite the orator, and I can see why you're so successful at it. So just yes, I just wanted to I guess chime in, give my 2 cents. I think, sir, that the October 7th attacks exasperated Biden's withdrawal, especially because of the Democratic Party. They've become so unpopular in the United States, and I guess in a way to separate the Democratic Party from Joe Biden, They had to do that. And I think that it'll either be, Michelle, Big Mike Obama, or but more likely than not, Hillary Clinton. And that actually concerns me even more, sir. And I just wanted to ask, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think
happen?
that's pregnant with civil war, Ahmed. I made that point in my monologue. It would be effectively a second round of American civil war, Hillary Clinton versus Joe Biden. That would be dangerously combustible, wouldn't it?
It would be, sir. It would be, especially just, I don't know, there's a mainstream narrative is so against nuance. And like, I'm an educator, a college professor, and I see a lot of the young people, they're just not open to cognitively assessing the other side's arguments, critical thinking. They just, engage in ad hominem attacks. And it's just, that's what concerns me. And because, these young ones are the future. And so if they're engaging in this now, what's the future going to look like? And so I just hope that, people wake up and see that, there's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more gray area. It's not everything is black and white. And to, put our
Indeed so, Ahmed,
aside.
thank you for that call. Educator, college professor in North Dakota, underscoring the point that I regularly make, that this is the global university of the airwaves. Let's go to Cornwall in England, where Helen wants to talk about Palestine. Welcome, Helen. What would you like to say?
Hello, George. Yes, what I'd like to say is I feel like screaming at the evangelical churches and the churches in this country, the US churches, and all over the world who are so complicit. They are not doing anything. They are not saying anything. They are not a voice for the innocents, for the children that are suffering, for the innocence of the Palestinian people. They are doing nothing. They think Jesus is going to come and fly through the sky.
Including my own church, I'm sorry to say. My own church is more than most, but still pitifully, woefully inadequate in its public pronunciamento. In private, you wouldn't find any difference between your view, my view, and their view. But they, for one reason or another, mainly cowardice actually, don't have the ability to speak it publicly and act on it publicly. Sorry, Helen, to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, they live in cuckoo land. A lot of them think Jesus is going to fly through the sky and take them out for it's a rapture and get away because we're in a tribulation period. It's just all a load of nonsense. We have to stand all united together. The world is so evil. And our governments, our rulers are absolutely disgusting. They're sickening. And I've seen all your social media videos of the children, and I cry my heart out. I'm trying everything. Anybody I know, I mention it to them. And this is the other thing. The majority of the public are so naive. Either it's the media, which is not educating us and telling us we need to know what's going on. We should know what's going on. And shame on all of them, and shame on the Arab countries and all the neighbouring countries near Palestine who are doing nothing. And I say one more thing. Long live every Palestinian child and the Palestinian people. Long live Palestine. God bless them. Amen.
Amen. Amen. It's funny you say long live Palestine, because coming up after the break is the one and only Lowkey, the renowned hip-hop artist, songwriter, activist and philosopher, king, and long live Palestine, is his greatest hit. Thank you, Helen, for a very powerful call indeed. The situation that we face now is that we are now armed. If you take Lamis's wonderful Tour de Horizon, we are now armed with the judgment of the highest court in the land, in every land, in the world. We must arm ourselves with the facts of that judgment. And we must make that judgment our sword and shield as we go into the future battles that lie ahead. The one thing that the judgment has changed, the terms of trade, terms of engagement, is that we now undeniably are the ones fighting for international law to be observed. And the others are fighting to defend brazen, bloody criminality. I'll be right back after a short break with the one and only Lowkey. You don't want to miss him. I never do. Stay tuned. I discussed with Mr. Jeremy Corbyn on the telephone, and I have told him that I am now going to announce that I, the Workers' Party, and I believe millions in the country, call on Jeremy Corbyn to launch a British version of the new Popular Front. He may or may not want to form a party himself. Others will remain in their own parties. But he must be the leader of a Popular Front. He's not a perfect leader, Mr. Corbyn. None of us are perfect leaders, but he is the leader. And he does have a seat in Parliament with which to lead the millions of people who today and increasingly over the next months and years will reject the policy, personalities and direction of a Keir Starmer government. So, Mr. Corbyn, I told you I was going to say these words, and I now formally say them. On behalf of the Workers' Party of Britain, we ask you to lead and unite all the forces of the left, of the radical forces in Britain who reject neoliberalism, who reject endless war, who oppose genocide. Mr. Corbyn, lead us. We will follow you. And I very much hope to hear positive news on that from you by return.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, Lowkey is the most significant artist to emerge from the street in the United Kingdom. In my lifetime, I think, not just a hip-hop artist, not just a broadcaster, but a man I call the philosopher king. Like me, he ain't no academic, bruv. But when you hear him speak, he should be at the United Nations. He should be in Parliament on the front bench. This is a man of towering intellect, integrity, and eloquence. And I'm only glad he's a friend of mine. Lowkey, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Now, here I have a difficulty, Lowkey. I have two football teams, one in Scotland, one in England. Celtic in Scotland, Manchester United in England. Both of them are sponsored by Adidas. I have a wardrobe full of Adidas. I have 5 young children, 4 of them heavily involved in sport, that are clad from head to foot, literally, in Adidas. So I'm making this stand on Adidas. It's the first stand I've made on boycott that actually affected me personally. As I said at the beginning, you'd never catch me with a Happy Meal or a glass of Coca-Cola. But I'm going to have to eschew Adidas from now on. And so should everybody else, shouldn't they?
Absolutely, George, and thank you so much for your tremendous introduction, which I am certainly not worthy of. And firstly, let me send my salutations to the steadfast and heroic people of Yemen. This is a thousands of years old, this civilization, which is being attacked, maligned, and dehumanized in every way possible and bombed by the Israelis, Britain, the United States, and seemingly with help from the Italians and possibly regional actors. We stand with you, Yemen. We are your brothers. And of course, your sisters here in London. But in thinking about Adidas here, it's important to look at the trajectory of this company. It was, of course, founded just before the rise to power of the Nazis, and the founders and heads of the company became fully registered members of the Nazi Party. And as was the way with corporate infallibility of the World War II period, you had companies like Coca-Cola, companies like Ford, companies like IBM, all of them worked with the Nazis. It's actually out of the Nazi period that you get the invention of Fanta as a drink, because of course Coca-Cola could not import to Nazi Germany some of the ingredients that they needed for Coca-Cola. But the corporate invincibility was such that those very companies which traded with the Nazis and were present in Nazi Germany during World War II actually got reparations from the British and the US following World War II for some of their property which was bombed in Germany at the time. So Adidas as a company has always been aligned in an interesting way with some of the more fascistic manifestations of political movements. But then when you look at even in the last 10 years or so, Adidas came under fire for its partnership with the Israeli Football Association, whereby Adidas was a key partner to it and sponsored football matches in illegal settlements in occupied Palestine. And even in addition to that, Adidas has in recent years heaped hundreds of millions of dollars onto the Israel lobby group and spy agency, the ADL. And just so we're clear about what the ADL is, it's an organization which infiltrated a plethora of groups, even trade unions, but also it spied on the great Archbishop Desmond Tutu, an anti-apartheid activist. It's even believed to have been involved in spying on Martin Luther King. So how is it that Adidas has been able to maintain this reputation as somewhat of a non-partisan company when actually it has taken some pretty significant political positions? And the most recent one, it has now cancelled the famous Palestinian model, BellaHadid. So it seems that Adidas has sought to cancel Palestine, Palestinians and Gaza. But actually, it will find that Gaza will cancel Adidas.
I'm into all of that. But nowadays, Adolf Dassler was, of course, greatly helped by Hitler and by Nazism and their preoccupation with sport in its various forms. And he was the tailor to fascist sports in Germany, the founder of Adidas. But nowadays, these companies are owned by shareholders, big capitalists, pension funds, and the rest. So the directors have made a judgment here, haven't they, that the pro-Israel lobby is greater and more powerful than us. I'm determined to prove them wrong about that. And I pray in aid of the success so far of the boycott of McDonald's, the boycott of Starbucks, and so on. What can you tell us about how the ground lies in the great battle of boycotts?
Well, when it comes to Adidas, of course, their top shareholder is none other than Vanguard. And Vanguard has a charitable arm which allows for anonymous donations from donors. Through the Vanguard charitable arm, it has literally pumped hundreds of millions into not only Israel lobby groups, but also Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And that is the top shareholder in Adidas. In terms of the general lay of the land, with companies paying some sort of price for their pro-Israel positions, this is, of course, a welcome development, and we encourage it absolutely. However, we must also be clear that the limit of our action cannot be merely petitions and boycotts at a time of genocidal Zionism, when it's really a choice between late-stage Zionism and late-stage Palestine. And now we have to escalate. Just as the resistance factions across the region are seeking to escalate to meet Israel's aggression on Gaza in an effective way, we also here must, as well as boycotting, look at other ways of taking direct action, civil disobedience in every way that we can.
Switching then to the political front, the well-known human rights lawyer, King's Counsel no less, Prime Minister of Britain no less, has remained absolutely silent on the presumably significant to him decisions that were made by the ICJ this week. Do you think this places Western governments in trouble if they completely ignore the significance, awesome significance, of the ICJ verdict?
Well, of course, when you look at somebody like Keir Starmer, he was a member of the Trilateral Commission alongside former directors of the CIA. This is somebody that had a very close relationship with Eric Holder, and is actually, it's believed that during his time, the CPS was instrumental in keeping Julian Assange here and prolonging the Swedish case, the bogus case against Julian Assange. Starmer has served as a handmaiden to US interests. Even a few days ago, Starmer went so far as saying Joe Biden is in perfectly good form. But what do we see today? We see Genocide Joe standing down. Genocide Joe has done everything in his last few months to kill Gaza. But actually we see Gaza will outlive Genocide Joe. In terms of the ICJ ruling and what it will mean for these Western governments, we've seen Labour particularly go back on all of its promises previous to coming into power. It said that it would drop the British move to slow down the arrest warrant being issued by the ICC. It did not. It came into power and did not. In fact, Lammy had said that Britain would cooperate with any ICC arrest warrant. Clearly, he is against that. Starmer said they would recognize the Palestinian state immediately. He went back on that because he said he didn't want to harm Britain's special relationship with the United States. What we know is this is a decline of US Anglo-Saxon power in the world, and also a decline of Zionism in Palestine. And it seems that people like Starmer and the US president, but soon to be former US president, Joe Biden, will of course take these governments down with the ship. It's really going to test the integrity of these international legal institutions, the extent to which their pronouncements will actually have an effect on the ground in a tangible way.
Well, they'll have an effect in the propaganda war, that's for sure. As I was saying just before you came on, we are now armed with sword and shield of the judgment of the most significant, eminent, most powerful, most important court in the world. And it's our opponents who are defending brazen illegality, and every reference that we can make back to the ICJ will help us harm them. But you're right. Political power comes out the barrel of a gun that you are firing yourself or that you're giving to someone else to fire. Now, amongst the failures of the Keir Starmer government that you adumbrated, there's another. Labour said that they would ban British arms sales to Israel, and today they have said that it would be wrong to have a blanket ban on British arms sales to Israel. The betrayal is never ending. But as we both know, this is a very small enchilada indeed in our island. The big enchilada is in the US. How do you assess the impact on world politics of the President of the United States having to retire from the field through the severe cognitive problems that he's been displaying over many months?
Well, let's be clear. This is an indictment of the aesthetics-obsessed democratic class of sycophants who, for them, the killing, industrial killing of children in Gaza was not a red line, but Joe Biden making them look bad in debates was a red line. Joe Biden has a very well-cultivated image as somehow an anti-racist. But how does that actually line up against his historic record? Let's not forget that Joe Biden was responsible for the omnibus crime bill in 1994, which doubled the US prison population and quadrupled the sentences that people were getting. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which was partly written by Biden, ratcheted up penalties for drug crimes. You saw particularly the disparity in sentencing between crack cocaine and powder cocaine at the same time when Gary Webb revealed the CIA was pumping the ghettos of the United States through the Contras in Nicaragua with crack cocaine. You also saw the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988, which again was seen to target the black community in the United States. And even around the same time, in the 70s, when the US federal government opened a case against Trump and his father for discriminating against black people in their properties, what was Biden doing? He was a segregationist fighting to keep black children out of schools that are attended by white children. Joe Biden supported NAFTA, which led to the loss of almost 4.5 million manufacturing jobs. He supported the taking away of welfare when the welfare system had 70% of those receiving it as children. Biden supported student debt, which is over 1.5 trillion. And often that debt can be passed on to parents when their children die. Biden voted to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, which regulated the banks, and this then in turn led to the 2008 crash. Biden supported private healthcare, which is believed to be responsible for 2/3 of the 10,000 bankruptcies a day which afflict the United States. Of course, Joe Biden is a creature of that system. He escalated in Ukraine to a level previously unimaginable. Joe Biden will go down in history as Genocide Joe, the butcher of Gaza. And remember, who are these people to unleash an invasion akin to the Mongols raiding Baghdad on the ancient civilization of Gaza? As you, George, know, as a man of letters, there are hieroglyphics in Egypt mentioning the word Gaza. The Ugaritic language, thousands of years old, mentions the word Gaza. Who are these people with their short history to come to a civilization of thousands of years and attempt to erase it completely? They did not, and they will not. The lesson of the Palestinian cause is that even in 1935, when they killed Izz ad-Din al-Qassam, it was supposed to end Palestinian resistance. Or how is the irony of history that the rockets that fall on Israel today are named after the person killed in 1935, Izz ad-Din al-Qassam? They cannot take on Gaza, they cannot take on the mighty Yemen, and they will go scuttling back to the United States and even to Europe.
I couldn't follow that, Lowkey, and I wouldn't want to. Priceless, poetic, and powerful words. Thank you very much for joining us on this auspicious evening on the mother of all talk shows. Will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? Yes or no? You can have your say. You've got about 20 minutes left to do so. Christina Hines says, lots of respect to Lowkey and the former guest commentator, that was Lamis Deek. If we had such commentators on the BBC, Sky, etc., more so, voters would be better informed. We must, therefore, promote MOATS TV. Christina, how beautifully put. Let me take a quick break, and then on the breaking news out of Washington, it's Washington's coolest cat, Garland Nixon. Stay tuned.
Hello, George. I heard Neil Kinnock commenting on you losing your seat, okay? I was disgusted and amazed at what he said. He was like an ignorant football supporter. He actually punched his fist in the air, saying he was delighted that you were gone, that you were a horrible person. That's the first thing he said. When he was leader of the Labour Party, he was conniving morning, noon and night to kick you out of the party. Now, this is before Tony Blair, and you were in good standing with the Labour Party. Mr. Kinnock, that chap just totally disgusted me. So what I think the British have to do, and the Irish and everybody else, is they need a new conversation and stop drinking Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And I think all those people in British civil society, including Jeremy Corbyn, Diane Abbott, Ken Livingstone, and very many more, have to have a conversation about how to wean the British and everybody else away from these Coca-Cola and Pepsi parties.
Nobody knows who Neil Kinnock is. Those who know who he is know he's the man from the Welsh Valleys that betrayed the miners. Frankly, the hatred of Neil Kinnock I wear not even as a badge of honour, a little tiny pin maybe, because pretty soon no one will have heard of him at all. But the wider subject that you raise is the important one. I don't know, Jeremy says he doesn't want to form a party. That's fine by me. I've got my own party. I'll be staying in it anyway. But what I would like him to do is to announce a new popular front, like the one that has just, I can tell you officially, won the French parliamentary elections.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, Deef says Celtic fans get called terrorist supporters for flying the Palestinian flags. Yet I see windows all over where I live with Israel flags. Can't these people open their eyes? There are none so blind as those that will not see. Before I go to Garland, let me go to someone else in Washington, D.C. Gregory is on the line about Biden stepping down. Go ahead, Gregory. What do you want to say?
Hi, George. Finally, it took long enough, didn't it? This has been going on for the last 18 months.
It did, but it's very significant. It's very significant, whatever the timing.
Well, pushing Hillary Clinton out there, she's just going to be a piñata for Trump.
I like that. That vision is now filling my brain.
Well, you can imagine how Trump's going to take it out on her, can't you?
Yes, I can. But Kamala Harris not going to move over. Not easily anyway. Cackling Kamala, it's most likely to be, isn't it?
Oh, without question.
So how do you see that going?
It'll be terrible. There's no candidate on the Democratic side that has a chance of beating Trump.
Mm-hmm. So that's why they'll sacrifice her. She's a nothing, a nobody, a cipher, person who couldn't get a single delegate at the convention when she ran to be president prior to the 2020. Not one person, not one delegate supported Kamala Harris. She came bottom in every single primary. So she's expendable, isn't she?
Oh, definitely. Nobody wants, no one of significance in the Democratic Party wants to run against Trump.
Gregory, we've lost you. What a great pity. But we've got the able Garland Nixon, radio talk show host and political analyst and resident sage of the mother of all talk shows. who's always with us in an emergency. And boy, is this an emergency. Garland, your first reaction, please.
Well, I'm not surprised. The only question really was whether Joe Biden would step down as the nominee and president, or whether he would try to hold on to his position as president. So far, he's working to hold on to his position as president, of course, as would be expected. The Republicans are screaming at the top of their lungs, he has to go. If he's not competent to be the nominee, then he is not competent to be president. So the other big question was, would he nominate Kamala Harris? It's kind of well known around Washington, D.C. that he's not really crazy about Kamala Harris. He never was. I don't think he ever forgot her for the infamous I was that little girl speech. So now they've got Kamala Harris, and I suspect things are going to go downhill from here for the Democratic Party.
I feel that although they're making a show of unity at the moment, when the polls begin to demonstrate that Kamala Harris is even more unpopular than Joe Biden, the hue and cry for a replacement is going to increase, is it not?
Absolutely. And of course, now the question is, will they attempt to nominate her in early August prior to the convention, or will they wait until the convention, have an open convention, and try to have the various factions of the ruling elite compete for their, like a kind of a horse race where the factions of the ruling elite all bring their fastest horse. In this instance, I guess Kamala Harris will be seen by, I believe, the Hillary Clinton faction really supports her. They're the ones who put her in place in the beginning. Here's something interesting about Kamala Harris. Right now, the polls have her about the same as Joe Biden against Donald Trump. But if we look at her history, if we look at Kamala Harris when she ran previously, the concept of Kamala Harris as a candidate does far better than the actual personage of Kamala Harris as a candidate. So when people think, oh, woman, female, diverse, all that kind of stuff, there's a certain element in our society that feels quite spirited by that. But once they start hearing Kamala Harris, seeing Kamala Harris, her inability to emotionally connect with people, her inability to deal with people who come after her. When Donald Trump attacks her, Kamala Harris is going to get angry and kind of fall apart. So her history is her polling numbers generally drop pretty fast after people start getting a taste of the real Kamala Harris. And I suspect that there are those who have been researching her history and who know that. So now the battle is, will it be Kamala Harris? I suspect yes.
Yeah, but my guess is that that's not a battle that is finalized yet. They will return to it, whether it's Michelle Obama, the only one with the balls to stand up to Trump, or whether it is the ghostly sepulchral presence of Hillary Clinton, or the toothy smile of Newsom, or someone whose name most of us on this side of the Atlantic don't know yet. But I don't believe that's a closed question. But you're right. On the face of it, it's Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump was a full 5 points clear of Joe Biden. He's bound to be happy or not happy at Joe standing down. I suppose the best outcome for him would have been a continuation for some more weeks of speculation and doubt. But is he happy this evening or not so happy?
I think the Trump campaign was ready to go in either direction. I think certainly as long as Joe is there, they know that the issue of his cognitive decline is going to be, at the forefront, and they're going to aim at that, and they're going to, not back off of that. So I think they understand that. I think Kamala also, as they say in the military, you've got a target-rich environment there as far as, rhetorically going after her. You can, her record is not. So I'll put it like this. Here's something I just popped into my head. If you recall, when she ran for president, she was, just taken apart by Tulsi Gabbard over her record as the California Attorney General. I suspect, knowing Donald Trump, he's going to attack her from the left. He's going to attack her record. You know, what was she in trouble for? Putting a lot of black people in jail for drugs and marijuana, for issues of the issues regarding prisons and the death penalty, et cetera. And, you know, Donald Trump, ideologically speaking, he is not set, you know, to come at people from the right. So I suspect he will attack her record, her law enforcement related record from the left. And he's already, you know, starting to make some headway in the black community as far as voting. And of course, he doesn't have to get them to come to the polls for them. If he kind of exposes her record, a lot of people will stay home. So I would expect, interestingly enough, that Donald Trump will be attacking her from the left regarding her record in California as Attorney General. And we may see Tulsi Gabbard back.
Now, I don't want to go all DEI on you, Garland. But can you solve a mystery for me? I mean, Vince Majestic just writes, Kamala was never that little girl. She's Indian, for God's sake. Without disappearing up the DEI fundament, what is KamalaHarris? In the past, she majored on being the first Indian politician to make a national breakthrough. But now, when you hear her, I mean, she's down with the kids in the ghetto, as black as can be.
Well, now, I mean, Kamala Harris, her whole concept of being a black woman or whatever it is so fake and phony. I imagine she could always go get Elizabeth Warren and she could have the first black woman and a Native American vice president. If you know, that may be the plan if they're going to go down that road. But I think what you're going to see is this also. This is going to be kind of like a Disney superhero movie. We keep seeing these Disney superhero movies, right? And they'll have like 3 diverse female superheroes. They'll have a diverse female director. The writers are all diverse females. And the movie's horrible. Nobody goes to see it. And then Disney attacks all of the people who didn't go see the movie as a bunch of racists and sexist, right? That's the route they're going to go. They're going to throw Kamala out there. She's going to be beaten like a drum by Donald Trump. Her numbers are going to crash. And then they're going to attack the voters on Twitter and say they're a bunch of misogynists and sexist, and that's why she's crashing. The great thing is for Donald Trump is the party's in chaos. 3-4 months for the election, they have no clue what they're going to do. They don't have a decent nominee. And I suspect, just like Macron, just like Sunak, what we're seeing is Biden and his followers. You know, if Schultz were to run, what would happen, right? Biden and the people that have followed him, they take no account of their voters and the citizens of their country. They've got this crazy neocon ideology. And the same thing is going to happen that happened to Macron and Sunak to the Democrats. They're going to get their comeuppance from the working class voters as soon as the voters get their opportunities to get to the polls.
Amen. You always cheer me up, Garland. Thanks very much for joining us with this breaking news. Will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? You've got not even 10 minutes left to vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Let's go to England. Corby, Terence on Biden. Go ahead, Ter.
Good evening to you, Mr. Galloway. It's nice to hear you in such an ebullient mood. Regarding the disappearing Biden, who's been, I'm an Irishman, I stand with Israel, I'm an American. He's been everything for the Zionists that they wanted. Now the man needs help, and I'm not going to dwell on any of his cognitive disabilities. However, you know, the mention of Clinton. She's not a hawk. She's worse than a hawk, if it's possible. I've got a curveball here for you to consider, Mr. Galloway. I think that Anthony Blinken is in the wings waiting. Anthony Blinken is very cogent. He's very Zionist, and he'll appeal to people who really don't care, but he's a face you can deal with. I don't think you can deal with Michelle Obama. She's not a politician. I don't think you can deal with Clinton. She's just in the military-industrial complex. My money, and I don't gamble myself, is on Mr. Abe Lincoln, another President Lincoln of the future. What say you?
Well, it's a very interesting curveball. I don't agree because in a lifetime in politics, I have discovered there are two classes of people. This is not to make a value judgment on how good they are at what role they play, but there are what I'd call consiglieres, like Blinken, like the character in The Godfather, Tom Hagen. They are consiglieres. They are crucial, vital. I've had a few myself, consiglieres, but they will never be leaders. Being a leader is a quite different skill set and requires a certain sprinkle of something. It might be magic. It's more often the anti-magic, but it's a sprinkle of something. And I don't think that Blinken has that. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. And I don't believe that Blinken will ever have that thing. But thanks for the call. Marcia Fogarty says she's a nothing burger. Doesn't stand a snowballing chance in hell of being president. Naveen says KamalaHarris is a bluffer. And on line 2, we've got Adam in Colorado on Biden. Let's hear from Adam. Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, how's it going, man?
Welcome. Go on. Me? Yeah, go on.
I was going to talk to you about more than Biden, the military-industrial complex, the whole Zionist thing, everything basically, but very condensed and right to the point, if I can.
Mm-hmm. Now go on.
So, a lot of people say that we went to invade Iraq because of the oil, right? And that's basically just for the money and stuff like that. And then you have like the speech from General Wesley Clark, where he's like 7 countries in 5 years, right? I don't know if you've ever seen that. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like
everyone's seen it. Yeah, go on.
Every politician just has this goal, and I wonder where this is coming from. Where is like the DoD, Department of Defense, failed 6 audits or 7 audits now. They've never been audited before, ever. And it's a little suspicious with all this turmoil going on right now. And I don't know if you ever heard of David Grush with the UAP, the technology that's being hidden for humanity in general. And I feel like this whole thing was manufactured, right? They're manufacturing consent. And then they have this debate between Zionism and anti-Semitism, right? And they try to say that if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. And it's like, well, not every Zionist is racist, right? So how do you distinguish between a racist Zionist and a non-racist Zionist? And it becomes a whole confusion thing. And it's just, what do you think? I want to hear from you.
Well, I don't think that. But my first question is, who's manufactured it?
Well, have you read Noam Chomsky, Manufacturing Consent?
Sure.
Heard of him? And I feel like...
Have I heard of Noam Chomsky? Adam, I think you need to get with the program. You are right now talking to the most educated people on the planet, to the most politically cognizant people on the planet. When you ask if people have heard of Wesley Clark's statement, when you ask if I have heard of Noam Chomsky, that just proves you're a new viewer to the show, and I welcome you. But I'm going to go on to a proper legend of the show. Sarkar in Glasgow on Yemen. Go ahead, Sarkar.
Good evening, George. Thank you so much for taking my call. George, it's about Yemen. Okay. I'll be honest, George, my mind cannot fathom something. Please help me explain that. See, I'll tell you what has happened. Mm-hmm. For the past 15, 20 years, maybe even longer, we, as a country, we have trained the Saudi airports, the Air Force, to bomb Yemen. We have supplied bombs to Saudis to bomb Yemen. We have gone and put our own bombs in Yemen to bomb Yemen. Yemen, a country for the past, I don't know how many years, has never done any coup, has never done any political interference, has never opened their mouths or poked their noses in our matters. Yes, if the Houthi rebels have attacked back, they have not killed a civilian, and they've only attacked back because we have constantly humiliated them to the point of dehumanizing them for year after year after year. If they attack, then the retaliation which we do, it kills many more innocent civilians. Today the West is acting all macho. Oh yes, the Houthi rebels attacked. Oh, they blocked our ship, so we're going to bomb more and more Yemenis. It looks all funny now. Nowadays they don't have strength. They don't have weapons. They don't have money. 10, 15 years down the line, if they become powerful, and if they do on October 7th, we cannot complain. We are constantly pushing people to a corner to the point of no return, and then when they get back to us, we blame them. When will this nonsense stop, George?
Well, there's not enough time left in the show for me to eulogize the people of Yemen to the extent that I would like to do. As you've heard me say before, Sarkar, one of my earliest memories as a political activist at the age of 14 was watching British soldiers, Scottish soldiers in fact, the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, murdering Yemenis in the Crater district in Aden, the great port in the Yemen. I later, and not much later, within 10 years, I was a partisan of the former state of South Yemen, PDRY, People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. No longer exists. Yemen is now reunified, and hallelujah to that. But here's the problem for Western governments now. First of all, it's quite evident, must be evident to the diplomats in the Foreign Office, if not the idiots that front the Foreign Office as ministers, must be evident to the Foreign Office staff. The people of Yemen are unvanquishable. We've been trying to vanquish them for hundreds of years. They have resisted colonial occupation, exploitation, invasion. They are literally unvanquishable. You'd have to kill every last Yemeni to vanquish them. They are the best warriors in the world, good friends, very, very bad enemies. The people of Yemen who speak the purest and best form of Arabic, the people of Yemen, mentioned so many times in the holy texts and by the prophets, the people of Yemen held in the highest regard by the prophets, are not going to be defeated by Joe Biden or Keir Starmer or Meloni or whoever else was involved in that attack on Hodeidah yesterday. But here's the point, Sarkar. They keep saying Houthis. In other words, it's not the Yemeni government. It's not the Yemeni state. It's not the Yemeni people who are doing all this rocketing of Tel Aviv and halting shipping in the Red Sea. It's a rebel group called Houthis. Well, if it is, why are you bombing the city of Hodeidah? Why are you bombing hospitals and homes belonging to the Yemeni state, the Yemeni people? Or are you lying? And that the so-called Houthis are in fact the Yemeni people in all their nobility and determination. Of course, it's the latter, Sarkar, but it just goes to show how foolish this false dichotomy is. We're now at war with Yemen. We will long regret it. If you don't trust me on anything else, trust me on that. We will long regret renewing our war on the Yemen. Bun's dad says, I'd take out a second mortgage to see Kamala debate George Galloway. I'd love that, actually. I'd love to debate KamalaHarris. Unburdened by what has been. Simon, another legend from Weaponized News, on the breaking news that Biden has quit. Go ahead, Simon.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Well, not only has President Biden withdrawn from the re-election campaign, but 30 minutes after doing that, he put out a rather belated endorsement of KamalaHarris that was not included in his original step-down notification. And it should be noted that both of those announcements didn't come from the official President of the United States feed, didn't come from the White House, but actually came from Joe Biden's personal account on Twitter. And it was so suspicious that the Associated Press had to contact the White House to ask them for verification. Verification now having been received, we've had another extraordinary development that former President Clinton and his lovely wife Hillary Clinton have now come out and formally endorsed Kamala. So it's interesting to see the great and the unwashed are now lining up behind Kamala 2023 after he gave the speech entitled A Time for American Leadership, by which he meant of the world, obviously, that he was angling for a run should the opportunity arise. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks. They have to make a decision no later than about noon on August the 7th. Otherwise, they're going to miss the filing deadline for the state of Ohio, and they would give up a lot of electoral college votes. But since you're mentioning the doings and goings on in Yemen, it should be noted that many of their officialdom have announced they are now in what they call the fifth escalation. And they've said that they're going to attack anybody who helps, quote, the Zionist entity, unquote, anywhere in the world. So there were calls yesterday for global conflict, and it would appear, as far certainly as the Houthi administration are concerned, that is their intention. They'll attack anybody supporting the Zionists wherever they may be. And the British and Americans have attacked them for about the 25th time after the Israeli attack yesterday. So it would appear that whilst Parliament are in recess, old Starmer has embarked on yet another imperial venture after having just met Zelensky with, of course, all the British military industrialists, where they actually had a private meeting with him to tuck up a whole load of deals for Ukraine. And the British Ministry of Defence have put out an announcement on X, on their official page today, saying that meeting formed the foundation for the 100-year partnership between Britain and Ukraine. So there's a heck of a lot going on. And thank you, sir, for allowing your audience to see what's going on in the
There sure is.
Because it's not just about
Simon. We're not going to go out of business, neither Weaponized News nor the mother of all talk shows. I always say when I introduce my good wife Gayatri, what's rattling, Gayatri? But I suppose the answer tonight is everything's happening. Gayatri, what's rattling?
A lot is rattling, starting with the poll, will the US-UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? Sherry says 75 years of exploitation, 9 months of genocide.
I've got to throw to a break because there are some audio issues. I don't know what they might be, but stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Just while we sort out Gayatri's audio gremlin, let me go to Hoz in London on Labour and Biden. Go ahead, Hoz.
Weeks and 5 days or 4 days since the Labour Party have come into power, and I remember whenever I was talking about the failure of the Uniparty, and I keep talking about how Labour is going to be no different in any way, shape, form to the Tory party, everyone said to me, you can't say that because they're not in power. They're in opposition. They need to be given an opportunity to get into power so we can see them, what they're going to do. Promises after promises after promises of change. And all I can say is that they've had 2.5 weeks, and the first place that our foreign minister's gone to is to the butcher of Gaza. That's the first place he's gone to shake hands and work out how they can improve their relationship with each other. Basically speaking, this Labour Party is going to be no different in any way to the Tory party that's in power. And I'm saying to all those people who said to me that I'm basically a fool and I should give Labour a chance, I'd like you, George, to keep track of how many days go by before we actually see one thing that's going to get done differently by this Labour government to the Tory government. I'd be grateful if you can do it once a week, maybe, or once every month, and it will carry on to see if Labour actually do anything different. I don't see a difference in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, we should do, thanks, Hoz, for that. We should do a kind of Starmer tracker, although ennui might preclude it, because neither you nor I were in any doubt that not only would there be no difference between Starmer and Sunak, Starmer might very well be worse, and already he's turned out to be worse. People laughed when I said on the Piers Morgan show, if you haven't seen it yet, it's a must-see on Piers Morgan Uncensored. I said that Keir Starmer will have Britain at war within 6 months. Well, it's not even 6 weeks, and we are at war in and with Yemen. The 100-year war that Simon in Florida just talked about indicates a British willingness to fight on in Ukraine for 100 years. Not making that up. 100 years of war. I mean, George Orwell couldn't write this. The failure to remove the two-child benefit cap, a piece of demographic insanity in a country with an aging population which doesn't want mass immigration but is penalizing families that have more than 2 children. The failure to control the bankers, the switching off of North Sea oil, the only asset, remaining asset, actually, that we have got. I could go on, Hoz, but I can't because I've got Gayatri back live in the studio, audio perfect. I'm so sorry, Gayatri, I came to you prematurely.
No worries.
It turns out. What's the big issue that's rattling tonight?
Obviously, you opened the show with the breaking news of Joe Biden's resignation letter, and though we all start speculating, well, then who is he going to endorse? We have then since seen from Hillary's office that they are endorsing the president's choice. But Goran says, completely right, George, Hillary was behind even Obama. She let him be the first black president. The Clintons are running the show for 12 years now. And even before, and during Bill Clinton, the NATO expansions in 1992, don't you remember? She's heading a group of people that are after Russia. So while she may have stated supporting the president, who knows what's going to happen next, right?
Well, yeah, they're supporting Kamala like the rope supports the hanging man. They are fully anticipating that she will fail and flounder.
Yeah.
And of course, there is not much time left, as Simon just pointed out. If you're not on the ballot in Ohio by the 7th of August, you're not on the ballot in Ohio. So you'd be wiping out one major state of the Union. So there's not much time. So I don't believe that Hillary has given up hope. I don't believe that Mike Obama has given up hope.
Yeah.
And I think it's significant that Joe Biden did not endorse Kamala in his resignation letter, although he gives a paragraph to her. Only later, half an hour later, did he endorse her. So there's chaos in the Democratic Party. I recognize chaos when I see it.
We see one, yes. We can definitely imagine it all happening in the White House. The second big thing is, of course, BellaHadid and Adidas. It's huge. It's huge. It's all over all the social medias. And Dr. Dostoevsky, no less, says Adidas stands for All Demand Israel Dismantles All Settlements. Okay, remember that. Just boycott, boycott, boycotts. And these boycotts work.
Well, they do work, and it's really taken off, right? I mean, when I, early this morning, put out somebody else's beautiful meme of a boy with his leg amputated, walking on a very thin metal leg, and his foot inside an Adidas trainer, as the wreckage and the bodies of the people of Gaza lying around. When I put that out this morning, almost 1 million views ago, I had no way of knowing that this was going to take off to the extent that it has. But this is now a worldwide, full-on, all-out boycott of Adidas. And I think we can win.
Yeah, we can, because the Hadid family, they are so tremendous. They have gone, from Palestine, the father, they were refugees. They were literally sent away from their homes. They've lived in refugee camps.
Yeah, they were kicked out from their own house by people that they had allowed to come and stay with them as Jewish refugees.
Exactly. I mean, it's just too banal to describe. You can script it yourself, but they have become the successful empire family, and so therefore they are. That's why this story has been trending tremendously, and it's so easy to boycott Adidas and products that have been endorsing or been to have had no feet to stand on in regards to Israel, because there's so many alternatives. We have discussed Huda Beauty, who I'm of course wearing, and Lush. That was also in the news this week.
I wanted to ask you about Lush.
Tell
us about this watermelon soap.
Lush is a fantastic British brand. They make, artisan soaps, all varieties, and they've been very good in charity work. And so they have launched this watermelon soap for hope. And with it comes the description. You can't wash away the trauma children experience during conflict, but you can buy this soap, and 100% of the profits will be donated solely to projects providing urgently needed professional mental health support and trauma counseling for children in Gaza and the West Bank. So obviously they have taken a stand. They are with Palestine. And so these are the brands that we should support, and we can do this.
It is important not just to boycott things, but to support products like Huda that you're wearing.
There's many more, of course.
You wear it well. But also Lush, which I hadn't heard of before, and we have no connection to either of these companies, by the way, if that needs to be said. Lush, that watermelon soap looks absolutely gorgeous. So you'd be buying something of beauty, and you'd be 100% helping the Palestinians in Gaza if you did. It's important to demonstrate, isn't it, that we are many and they are few.
Yeah.
The number of people who actively support the Israeli genocide is infinitesimally small.
Yeah.
It's just that it is an infinitesimally small group of people with a lot of power. Yeah. Whereas we are a huge number of people, and we have to demonstrate our power.
We, the Friends of Palestine, are huge. We are the majority, and we're proud of it. We stand by it. Whereas those Friends of Israel, they stand by it, but they're not proud to shout it off the roofs, are they? They can't. They can't, because they would be devastated. Here, the BRICS in news info announced that Pakistan has formed a committee to locate and ban products and businesses supporting Israel. See?
It's very good. The Pakistan government, I don't often have a good word to say about them, but that was Shahbaz Sharif. I saw him do it today. I know him well. He made a statement today, which, if they mean, is a significant one. They are now on the hunt for items that they can boycott to further the cause of justice as declared by the ICJ.
Yeah, speaking of the ICJ, very quickly, 2 comments on our poll. Will the US, UK enforce the ICJ war crimes judgment on Israel? John C. says, George, there's more chance of you and me walking to the moon, never mind flying. Whereas the church been in all this, you've already referred to that, and I have not heard a word about this genocide from the church. It's a disgrace. And Roscoe Mack says, these imperial courts, they're only meant for colored people, aren't they? Just a reminder.
Yeah, like you had to be black or Yugoslavian to appear in front of the ICC. Well, unfortunately, nobody likes to cut their own wife short, but I have to, I'm afraid, Gayatri. Thanks for that. We've reached the end of the show. A pretty fast-moving one, a tumultuous one, I hope. For you, an interesting and entertaining one. I've thoroughly enjoyed it myself. 3 great guests, great calls, and great comments. Thanks to the audience. God willing, I'll be back on Wednesday with the midweek edition of MOATS. But before that, I'll be filming tomorrow and putting out on Tuesday the latest edition of Have It Out with Galloway. So you've got 3 opportunities a week to watch us now. Please take them. Good night.